Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, and in today's video I am going to be making some art with these functional paints that I bought from Wilkinson for only 19p. And in case you don't believe me, here is a picture of them in the shop. I couldn't quite believe how cheap these were, so I thought I would give them a go. They come in a palette of 8, and they also have one of those really awful brushes, you know, the really wiry ones. So you have black, brown, purple, green, orange, blue, yellow and red. And I'm going to see if I can make some art with this, and I am going to use the brush even though it's terrible because I want to get the full experience of these paints. So let's get on with it. So I wasn't really expecting anything much from these paints because they were only 19p. And 19p, in case you're wondering, is about the same as 25 cents American cents. So really cheap, cheaper than $1, the cheapest paints I've ever found. And I wasn't really sure how they would work. And I think they are more like poster paints than they are watercolors, but you just activate them with water. But I was really surprised when I first put down the paint at how pigmented they are. You can see here that it's actually quite pigmented and really bright. And yes, they did dry very chalky, but I was expecting to have a real battle with the pigmentation. But yeah, I was really surprised, and if I hadn't been watching a episode of Pokemon Indigo League in the background, I would have included the audio of my reaction to how bright these are in this shot. But you can see in this close-up, it's very pigmented, but starting to dry chalky. So I decided to draw a flower for this because I wanted to do something quite simple but also use some colours, quite a lot of the colours, and I'm using the blues and the purples and the reds to try and shade, and it does dry very chalky as I expected, and it dries lighter than it applies, so I did end up having to do quite a few layers on this piece. But yeah, I did have quite a lot of fun, and I can see how you would use these. Normally you'd probably use them for a children's colouring book, and they would work really well, and I would recommend them if you have a child and you have a colouring book and you want to get some decent paints for them to colour in. I would recommend these paints because they're only 19p. Go to Wilkinson's. If you live in the UK, definitely get some of these for your kid, or for yourself if you are a big kid like me. So I am doing this flower, and took quite a long time to build up the layers, and there was only a certain amount of depth that I could put in because obviously they are really cheap paints, and I really struggle with the brush because it's really wiry. But I had fun, and I can see how these would be useful, but I probably won't use them again. I'm not going to swap out my Winsor & Newton Cotman set for these, don't worry. But yeah, I was quite impressed, and I was quite pleased at how this turned out in the end. But I need to tell the story of how I bought these paints, because when I saw them in the shop I thought, oh, 19p, that'll make a good video. Put them on my Instagram story and asked if people wanted a video, and a few people replied saying yes please, I want a video. So I bought them. But when I looked at the receipt as I went out of the shop, the receipt said that these paints cost me 35p, and I was like, oh, that's different to what it said. And I went back to the photo that I'd taken for Instagram, and I saw that yeah, I was right, it did say 19p, and it was priced right. It did say that the functional paints were 19p. So I had a little inner battle with myself as like whether I go back to the shop and tell them this, because it seems very petty, because 35p is still like a really good price and not really that much in it. It's only like 16p more. But they made a mistake, and also for the authenticity of YouTube, I couldn't put a thumbnail saying 19p or 25 cents paints when I actually paid a little bit more. So I did end up going back. I was that person. I went and complained. I was very nice about it. I just said, like, you've advertised it as 19p. I think there's a mistake somewhere in your programming, blah blah. Yeah, I felt really terrible and really kind of socially awkward about this, because I'm not one of these people that complains. Even if it's like a lot of money, I probably would feel really nervous about complaining. But for the sake of my YouTube channel, I did, and I explained that I don't normally do this, and I think they didn't quite believe me. But anyway, they did refund me the 16p. So after all that, I thought I probably should do a video and try out these paints just because of what I went through to get them. And like I said, they were very chalky, and they did dry a little bit muddy, so I ended up adding a few highlights with a little bit of white acrylic just to bring back some of the white. I tried to do this by watering down the paints and bring back the white of the paper, but it was eating up the paper and it didn't really quite work, so I just added the odd bit with the white acrylic, which was terrible with this brush. These brushes are not meant for acrylics at all. So this is how it turned out. You can see that the paper did eat up a little bit, and there's some bits of paint, and it's a little bit muddy, but for 19p or 25 cents, this isn't bad at all. So once I had finished the flower, I decided I would try and do a galaxy with these paints because I'm not very good at doing galaxies, and I thought this would be good to practice with some really cheap paints. I wouldn't be using up my expensive paints. And I forgot to say as well that I'm using some Canson cartridge paper for this, so I'm not using printer paper, but I'm not using watercolour paper either. I'm just using some kind of mid-range paper to give the paints a bit of the chance, and it did buckle quite a lot, but it wasn't too bad. So yeah, I'm doing a galaxy here, and I'm just layering up and letting it dry and layering up, and I did do quite a few layers, and I also did use the black. I know that I never really do that, and you might want to slap my wrist, but because the limited colours in this, I did have to use black, and the black was very pigmented. I was very surprised at how pigmented the black was because I wasn't expecting it to be. But as I finish this galaxy, I just wanted to say a couple of things about why doing these kind of challenges is useful, because you might think, oh, what's the point in trying really cheap paints or trying really cheap supplies when you have more expensive supplies? And I think it does push you, and it does test your knowledge of how to blend colours and how to use colours to your full advantage. Because if you know how to colour and how to do things like galaxy, for example, it puts them to the test a little bit when you're using non-expensive supplies. And it also shows that you can make art with supplies that aren't really expensive. You don't need to buy professional watercolours, you don't need to spend hundreds of pounds on art supplies to make some decent looking art. Yes, this isn't archival, it dries really chalky, and it's not the best outcome, it's not as good, nowhere near as good as if you use professional, but it's good for practicing, and it's good to show that you can make art out of anything. You can draw with just a pencil and paper, and I think we do forget that sometimes when we get overexcited about expensive art supplies. You don't need to spend a lot of money to make art. So let me know in the comments below how you think I did, and if there are any challenges that you would like me to try. So once I had built up the galaxy as much as I possibly could, I needed to add the stars, and to do this I used white acrylic again. That's just how you do these galaxies. So I'm trying to flick some on with the brush, and it didn't really work. I thought it would work because it's quite a wiry brush, but apparently not. So I ended up getting the toothbrush that I use for painting. It's a toothbrush that I use for painting, it's not one that I clean my teeth with, don't worry. And I was flicking it, and I'm not very good at this technique, so this is again a good time for me to practice flicking paint with the toothbrush. But it did work quite well, but I think I ended up getting more paint on the black piece of card that I taped the paper to than the actual galaxy itself. But yeah, I think it worked out quite well, and I was quite pleased with how this galaxy turned out. I do need more practice with them, but yeah, it was good. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed making this galaxy and making a little bit of a mess with the white paint. So if you're new to my channel, just quickly before I end the video, my name is Katie. I make art videos. I'd like to do a lot of challenges. I like to experiment with lots of different things to make art. And I have my own little mouse character called Charlie McNeil. So go and have a look on my channel to go and find out who he is. I'll leave a card to the playlist up above. And do feel free to subscribe if you are new. I make weekly videos. I upload every Thursday. And if you like this video, emotionally, do leave it a like down below, as that really helps me out. And here is the final result. I'm really pleased with how this one turned out, especially as the paints were really, really cheap. And that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday. Bye for now.